Professor Snart checking in here as we continue to move through our course. So we've just finished up Unit 5, which hopefully you found kind of interesting, a pretty interesting short story to read, and then I thought a kind of surprising connection, not just in a really generic thematic way to that video, but in some pretty literal ways in terms of like the use of that phrase, just a girl, and even the way that like setting or space is used in both of those to I guess to communicate that larger theme of gender roles. So hopefully kind of interesting. So one of the things that you maybe have noticed at this point, or is worth pointing out, is that it does take us a long time as we look at our due dates here to finally get to the first full-blown essay that we write here in Unit 7/8. So we have one more to go before we're ready to do that. But so the course is kind of built in this scaffolding sense where we, after the introductions piece, we sort of do kind of smaller incremental things, putting pieces together, whether it's like the shape of an essay idea. Here we talk about thesis statements. Unit 6 will have us looking at finding and using secondary sources. So to me, it makes sense to work through these kind of smaller pieces, right, and then put them all into place, rather than to say assign an essay back here in Units 3 or 2 or whatever, and then how would I grade that based on things that like we haven't covered yet. So the overall architecture of the course really does move us through these incremental pieces until we finally get to that full essay, and then honestly turn almost right around and get into the process for doing the final essay. So it might feel weird that the essays don't actually come until like the last half basically of the course, but that's intentionally so. Again, so that we can scaffold these pieces, but also so that once we do get to the essay, the first one and then of course the second one, you have a really good sense, hopefully, of what's kind of expected of you or what I'm looking for in terms of grading that essay. And of course, what I'm looking for is the application of the various ideas that we've worked through in the various units to that point. Okay, so let's take a look then at Unit 6. And Unit 6 is one of those that is not really super demanding in terms of the workload on you, but is really, really crucial in terms of the material that we cover, the conceptual stuff, and then your ability to apply it when it comes to that bigger essay, because it's connected with, you know, the research component of English 1102 as the research course. So this is, again, one of those things a little bit like MLA citation that is not terribly difficult, but is absolutely one of those things that you need to have some clarity on and certainly be doing correctly by the time we move out of English 1102. So in other words, doing these kinds of things correctly does have a really, really significant impact on your grade, both for like the essays themselves, but then kind of by default on the course as a whole. So that's why, again, like we scaffold towards it, we do these sort of smaller point versions of the things to really focus or hone in on the conceptual stuff. We practice it like we're doing here in this discussion board, and then you apply it in the essay. So there's a very brief midterm survey. It's just an anonymous, ungraded thing to see about how things are going so far, so you can take some time to do that. There's a couple of new readings that we'll be doing, and these will potentially feed into what you write about for our first essay. So of course it's important to do them, both from our textbook, and then the discussion board assignment. So we're looking for what are called sometimes secondary sources, sometimes it's called a source, or even a critical source, although they're not really negative necessarily. It just means in this case sort of like analytical, or it's looked for like the deeper themes and meanings in a piece of literature, whatever it happens to be. So we will be using the COD library website to access the databases. So one of the things that is really important to understand, and I'll reiterate this as we get towards the essays, is that sources for our purposes have to be both relevant and appropriate. So what does that mean? So the appropriate part means they come from a credible source, and for us, what we're going to use is the databases. So not just general like Google search stuff or anything you can access on the web. It's not that everything on the web is bad or unreliable or is written with a really slanted bias or something like that, but some of it is. And so we're going to use the databases because it directs us to material that's professionally produced, it's gone through an editorial process, and is actually, what you'll find, is really designed for use for our purposes, for students who've done like readings in literature and now have to write argumentative or analytical essays about them. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. So that's the appropriate part, where it comes from. For us, databases, that's sort of a cut and dry thing. So the appropriate part, or the relevant part, means that the sources that we find are going to be direct discussions of a primary text, like a short story like this one, Gorilla My Love, or Araby, or Boys and Girls, or whatever it happens to be. So if you thought about the story Boys and Girls, or some of these other stories, they have a lot to do with like child development, of growing up, of maturing. So that would be a really generic theme that's connected to that story. But we wouldn't then want to go and find something from our, developmental psychology textbook or some website about the maturing process or something like that, and then use that as a critical source. It deals sort of very tangentially with that same theme, but it's not a direct discussion of the primary text, which is fundamentally what we're looking for. So again, for us, for our source requirements here, and as we move through the course, it's really important that you show me that you get this idea of it's relevant and it's appropriate. It's from a database and it's a direct discussion of whatever primary text it is you happen to be writing about. Okay, so I've repeated, I just said basically what the instructions provide here. And this is what I say, that the workload here is pretty minimal. You're using a story that we've read so far, like one of these here, as your theoretical primary text. And then using a database to provide a sort of objective report. So you're not really evaluating the source as good, bad, or whatever. Just give us what's the title. Sometimes it's as simple as the title of the story. They don't get very creative sometimes. The name of the author. Sometimes you have to search a little bit, and sometimes database articles don't have authors, so that's good to be aware of. The original place of publication, if it was maybe in a journal or a book series, or its like initial like physical existence. And then, of course, the database that you got it from, and then a brief summary. So like, what does it contain? What's its approach? Did it point out some new things about a work that you maybe didn't recognize? But a very fairly objective just reporting of what the source is and what it says. So there is a reply feature here, but again, you're not really replying to the ideas put forward by another student necessarily, so much as trying to make sure, did they provide all of this information that's required? Is the source relevant and appropriate, of course, so you're kind of double checking that. And then maybe you can comment on, oh, you found a similar source, you found the same one, or you found one about the same story, or whatever. So you can try to engage it a little bit that way. But like I say, the initial post is kind of just an objective reporting of what's going on here. There's a little piece on effectively integrating sources into your writing. So whether we do it like at the start or in the middle, with an introductory phrase of some kind, whatever it happens to be. But note that we always want the quotation to flow as a sentence or to have some sort of introductory phrase. We never just hang a quotation in and of itself as its own sentence. It's too choppy. Your reader has no context for who's speaking or what's going on, so we need to provide that. And then, of course, we're citing correctly either by page number, or because database articles rarely have a page number, it's usually just author name is going to be in that parenthetical citation. Okay, so a really quick then visit to our library page. And then, of course, we'll be using databases. And if you're on campus like I am right now, I can just access any one of these databases by, general category here. If I knew which one I'm looking for, I could look by title and all that kind of stuff. If you're off campus, though, like I mentioned before, here's where you're going to have to enter your library ID card number so you can access the material. So we are looking within the humanities subhead for literature databases. We get a nice list of ones that COD subscribes to. You'll see that they're kind of described here in a little overview. There's lots that you can try. Certainly any or all of these might have material that we're looking for, but the ones that I've found were pretty good for our purposes are the Literature Criticism Online, Literature Resource Center, and this McGill on Literature Plus. So notice that if I click myself into one of these, I'm no longer at the COD, like within the COD website. I'm at a new place here. That's where, to get here, I'd have to enter a library card number. So it's first important to recognize that you'll often see like an EBSCO or a Pearson or what are some other ones? Gale Group, for example. Those are like the big parent companies that own or maintain lots of different databases. So when you do your post here, make sure that you post the name of the database, not this big parent company. So the database itself is, of course, this McGill on Literature Plus. So there's lots of different ways of searching. I'm not going to get into that. It's usually easiest just to jump right in and figure things out. Each database operates a little bit differently, and of course there's tons of different options that we might look for. You know, we'll do this as a title, see what we find. And of course, like if nothing worked, so I get one result, that's really all I need. But if that really wasn't enough, I could obviously go back and do lots of different kinds of searches to discover more information. And if you don't have luck in one database, try a different one because they do collect different material. So I click myself into this one, and here's where I'd get all the information I need for my post for Unit 6. Notice that the title is rather unhelpfully just like Araby, same as the short story. The author name is Owens, Coylin, or Colin, I guess. Colin Owens. The original place of publication here is provided, so back in 04, it had actual page numbers there. And then the material itself. There's lots of fun things you can do. If you want to listen to it, you can. If you want to listen in an Australian accent, you can. Always a hoot. But notice that, and this is why we use the database stuff, is that it's not like a 35-page article. It's not just a tangentially related thing. It's really specific and manageable based on our primary texts. It gives us a sort of overview of the story, themes and meanings, much more useful for our kind of analytical writing, even some notes about style and technique, but a really digestible, kind of manageable source that we have here. So it's directly related to our topic or our primary text, and it's like sort of designed to be used for our purposes. So that's one of the reasons that we use just database stuff. Again, if you're off campus, then you'll need your library card to get access to the databases. If you're on campus, you should just be able to float right into them. And if you're searching for something in one database and it just doesn't seem to be producing very good results, you can always try a different one. Go back to the main list, pause for coffee, and try a different one. There's lots of different options that we have here. So again, like I said before, a fairly limited kind of investment of your time to do this assignment, but a really, really important component of our course that of course will have applications almost immediately when we get around to doing our first essay. And it has a significant impact on your grade. If you do it right, that's great. If not, it shows a real kind of gap in what you've learned in the course so far. So as always, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to be in touch, and I will talk with everybody soon.